recording now. So hi, good morning, good afternoon and good evening to everybody. And very warm welcome to Jean-Luc Dupont's session on small type difference, big relationship impact. And Jean-Luc, I think, is known to most of us, but his mission in life is to help people discover their true type and enjoy it to its fullest dynamic. So we are completely delighted to have you here speaking to us today, Jean-Luc. So very welcome, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. So welcome to this presentation. And for some of you, probably it's a good afternoon. Some other, maybe it's a good morning. So I hope everybody will find and enjoy it. This presentation is an history. I don't know whether you have the case, but personally, most of the time when I do a type facilitation training, I get people at the end of the session that come to me and ask me a question about, often is the spouse or the kids. I see it in that you are saying yes. So, and often the question, and the silly question, which is, can it work? And I tend not to say that it's a silly question, but it's a silly question. But the question is not, should it work? Will it work? The question is, how can we make it sure it works? So this is the purpose of my presentation. And basically, maybe it's my own projection, maybe it's my own sensitivity, but I have the impression that when the type difference with this person is just one letter, I kind of think or feel that their voice is a bit different. I have the impression it's more supplicating stance. We've got just one letter difference. Do you think it can work? It's like, please tell me it can work. I will never say it will work, it will not work, because we have a huge responsibility. Let's assume I say stupidly, well, it's going to work. Maybe it's not a good idea to say that, because maybe it's going to make something suffer more. Or maybe I say it shouldn't work, which is criminal to say that. Maybe I'm going to help stop something that has a chance. So I always say this is not the right question. The right question is, how can we make it work? But then I said, I'm going to try to find whether a one letter difference makes a lot of problem or not. And if you have followed the presentation of Teresa Moon, I think it was yesterday or the day before, was amazing. I found it so interesting. She saw the picture of a guy who has made a table saying, if you have got this time, the person has got this time, and you have Sterling, I see you saw it. And there was 4 or 5 colors saying it's going well, it's not going well. I mean, that's criminal to say those kind of things. So I'd like to answer this question, whether a one letter difference makes a lot or not. And then, of course, I have to look at the whole difference. So it can be a E or I difference, a J or P difference, can be the dominant function, which is different, can be the auxiliary function, which is different. I said to myself, let's watch what's happened. So the question is, does a one letter difference makes something? And maybe, Mary, and as you are in Canada, you know the story I'm going to tell you. This is a story of a young boy. He's in love with the maple leaves. And for his birthday, he asked his parents to get a cake, a birthday cake with the maple leaves. And the parents went to order a cake about the maple leaves. And Marianne, maybe, or probably you know that maple leaf is this. Maple Leaf is the hockey team of Toronto. You see Toronto Maple Leafs, okay? And I didn't show a photo where they're winning because I'm living in Montreal. So if they happen to know in Montreal that I'm showing the Toronto Leafs winning and I show that to Brits, I may be in a difficulty. So I decided to show a more neutral photo. And so they went to the shop and they ordered this Maple Leafs cake. The problem is the employee taking the order forgot just one letter. And that's not a lot because you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, space 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 letters. It's just a one letter difference on 12. And probably the employee was not sensing, or maybe an extrovert sensing in a rush. Maybe he or she was an intuitive in his own world. And finally, on the order, instead of having the maple leaves, the kid got a birthday cake with maple leaf. And this is the cake he got. And so if you watch, you've got the blue color with the white letters. So you've got the blue colors with the white letters. So it's okay. But the problem is this red thing, because maple leaf in Canada is this. So let's assume your son is in love with Eden Hazard, or your daughter is in love with Lewis Hamilton. Eden Hazard is a nice player, is a nice gentleman. Lewis Hamilton is a great driver and a great gentleman. And basically what they receive is a birthday cake about bacon. And I don't mean any disrespect to the people that make the bacon, but I don't think the kid was very happy. So one letter can make a huge difference. No, I love you more than bacon. Yeah, I hope so. Okay, so basically, just for the story, it ended very well because some people at Maple Leaf happened to hear about the story, and they invited the kid to a game of the Maple Leaf, offered a beautiful birthday cake, and they managed it very smartly. Okay, so one letter can make a difference. But before I start to dig into that, I'd like to give a few words of caution. Okay, and those few words of caution are those. This is a weather forecast. By the way, that's the forecast of the weather in Salt Lake City in 2 weeks from now. I went to Salt Lake City for the EPTI conference. I love it. But that's the actual weather. And so we are on a Sunday, and the weather forecast is 20 degrees C. It's centigrade, hopefully, with some mix of sun and clouds. But this is the actual weather I get. This is a forecast, and the forecast comes from a mathematical model, but this is the actual reality. So a model is an attempt to understand what reality may look like. If I want to know what the weather looks like, I prefer to look outside the window than see what the model says. So never try to force reality into a model. A model can be great, it's just an attempt to understand what reality may look like. That's my first word of caution. My second word of caution, you see here, I've got a few samples of a product. This is a green one, this is a purple one, this is a blue one. Okay, it's great to try to analyze and understand and see the different things inside someone. But as Cindy Paris said 3 days ago or 2 days ago, this is holistic. And the purpose is, she said also, it's developmental. So the idea is not to become analytic for the sake of analytic. The idea is just to say, how can we help ourselves and how can we help other people to grow? So my last word of caution, this is an onion. In an onion, you have different layers. And this presentation, you will have different layers. One of them is some lenses. Another one is the interaction style. Another one is the archetype. But there may be other lenses. I had heard already about the essential motivators of Linda Behrens. I would like to learn about that. But this is not covered. And maybe within 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, I don't know, someone will have found another layer. And maybe some of us will take this work and do something else and go further, because we are a community and we work by layers. So my few words of caution: type is not meant to forecast. Type is not meant to put people in boxes. A model is just an attempt to understand how reality may look like. It's not an attempt to force reality. Never try to force reality inside the model. And basically, we are all trying to help people understand themselves better, trying to help ourselves understand ourselves better, just because growth is important, okay? And in this presentation, you will have different layers, and depending on your layers of analysis, you may find one or another thing which can be interesting. Any comment or question at this stage? Okay, fine. So we will start with the poll, and this poll is: think of your personal experience, think of your professional experience, and typically, would you say that you have more difficulties with people, whether professional or private, who have one letter different, which is EI, or we have a different, which is the dominant function, or the auxiliary function, or the JNP? So, Sarah, I saw that you launched the the poll. Okay, right now I have 2 answers. And I have 6, 7, 8 answers. Okay. Anybody still has to vote? No? Okay, so it's, oh yes, still see some votes coming. Okay, everybody voted? Sarah, can we close it? So it's very interesting because what I see is that the EI type difference is with a small margin, the winner, okay? And then JNP difference is the second one. And of course, given we don't have 100 people, the difference are going to be low. That's very interesting because I had expected not to have this kind of result. I had expected to see the EI type difference to be lower, but we'll come back on that later on. Okay, thank you so much. So before I go a bit further, I'd like for some of you to present, for some of you to remember a few of the lenses. But before we go there, maybe if some of you have an experience to share about what you said, this type is more difficult than this type to me. Who wants to share some experience about that?
I'd be happy to volunteer something.
Yeah, yes, Turley.
I have had I have ENTP preferences. And I've had, over the last decade, 2 disastrous business relationships with ENFPs.
Okay.
You know, one is, okay, that's just random. But at 2, it's starting to feel, now we're starting to look like a pattern. And yes. I don't see that problem in personal relationships, but when professional relationships, for whatever reason, I've had several disastrous ENFP relationships with business.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay. Great. Well, you know the rule,
which is the auxiliary. So that's what I selected auxiliary.
Okay,
so
okay.
That's one of the reasons I selected that.
Okay. You know the rules of the 3 apes. If someone tells you you look like an ape, you don't care.
Oh yeah.
If 2 people said to you you look like an ape, look at yourself in the mirror. And if 3 people tell you that you look like an ape, go and buy peanuts. So yeah, 2 is in the middle of, is it random? Is it a trend? Okay, fine. So before we go in the analysis of the 4 cases, I'd like to either present or review with some of you the different lenses I took. I've got the communication styles. I've got the leadership style coming from the temperament from David Kersey. I love the Damian Killen conflict management style. I have a way of looking at change management, which is a bit unconventional, I think. Then, of course, I took the interaction styles of Linda Behrens. And then, since the day I discovered the way John Beebe looks at archetypes, I fell in love with that. So communication style is quite common. So tendency to group together the functional pairs. So the STs going from ISTJ till ESTJ with our SPs friends. Then we've got the SFs, ISFJ, ISFP, and so on and so on. Then in blue, we've got the NFs pairs, INFJ, INFP, and so on. And then the NTs, rational in temperament, so intuition and thinking, and the 4 intuition thinking type. That's one lens, I think, which is quite common and which are often is used in communication styles, grouping the sensing versus the more abstract way of communicating, and the more direct versus more sensitive way of communicating. Okay. Then we've got the leadership. And leadership, what is very interesting in leadership style is that the rational, the NTs, and the idealist or catalyst for Linda Behrens groupings is the same as for communication. But here things change with the sensing, where what I love in this model is they say sensing is more influenced due to his attitude, introverted sensing for the SJs, extroverted sensing for the SPs, than the presence of thinking or feeling with sensing. So we have got a grouping of the quadrants, introverted sensing, sensing judging, Then we've got the grouping of the artisans, sensing, perceiving, which means extroverted sensing. And then in terms of ends, they say feeling has more influence than the attitude of intuition, and thinking have more influence on the end than the attitude of the intuition. So we've got a different type of grouping of the functions. Then we've got the conflict management lens of Damian Killen, and I must say I love it. And by the way, I use it very often when I have people in training who have an hesitation in between F and T or J and P. J and P, my experience is a lot of confusion for people, and I do find the conflict management styles often help them understand better their own profile. And so there, the idea of Damian is saying, let's look at the rational functions, thinking, feeling, and let's look at the attitude of the function. Is that extroverted thinking, introverted thinking, extroverted feeling, introverted feeling? And what Damian says is that extroverted thinking, so you see them in yellow here, well, they have a way to react in conflicts, which is totally different from introverted thinking, which you find here in red with the ISTPs, INTP. And then we have the extroverted feeling, ISFJs, INFJs, CSFJs, ENFJs. And then finally, you have my own type, which is the introverted feeling types. And I love it. And I must say that among all the lenses I use, this one often sounds very true and familiar and helping to the people I'm working with. Okay. And then the next lens will be the change management lens. And the change management lens, I know that there's been work in the past saying you group sensing and intuition on one side with extroversion and introversion. And it doesn't ring a bell for me, because if I do this grouping, I come to the conclusion that both ESTJs and ESTPs have both got sensing and extroversion. And for me, an ESTP and an ESTJ that react the same way faced to change situation, it has not happened in my life. I never saw that. So I had a lot of thinking about that. And I believe that if you take sensing and intuition, and you take the attitude, so extroverted sensing, introverted sensing, extroverted intuition, introverted intuition, to me, it rings a much bigger bell. And so I use that when I work in change management. So I have the introverted sensing, which are here in yellow, the extroverted sensing, which are there in red. So it gives me the same grouping as in the temperament. But then for the intuitions, I will group the introverted intuition together, and I will group the extroverted intuition together. And we can argue on that, of course, but to my own experience, it's closer to what I have seen in reality. Okay, and I'm not sure how many people would say you're right, you're wrong, whatever, but that's the way I tend to approach change management style. Okay, and then we've got the interaction styles. So for those that are not familiar with interaction style, there is an easy way to remember that. You take every temperament. So we've got the rational on the right side, the idealist or the catalyst here in the second column starting from the right. And then we've got in the middle here on the two left columns, the artisan, and top and bottom two left, the guardians. And in every temperament, there is one of the four interaction styles. It's a very easy way to remember it. Okay, and so in terms of the rationals, we've got the in charge, ENTJs, get things going, ENTPs, chart the course, ENTJs, and behind the scene, INTPs. And same for DNFs, in charge, get things going, chart the course, behind the scene. And then it becomes a bit more complicated here in terms of visualization, not in principle. The artisans, ESTPs, the in charge. I had a boss who was an ESTP. He learned me what in charge means. ESFPs, get things going. Then we've got the in charge with the ISTP. My son is an ISTP, is a chart the course. He has learned me what chart the course means. And then ISFP, behind the scene. Very, very, very interesting combination between the extroverted sensing and the behind the scenes stuff. And then for the guardians, in charge ESTG, get things going ESFJ, chart the course ESTJ, and behind the scene ISFJ. Okay, ISTJ, ISFJ. Sorry, as you may have heard, I'm French speaking, so sometimes E and I, French tends to mix with English. Okay, and then finally we've got the archetypes. And archetypes, okay, there are different names, whether you work from BB or Jung, whatever. But okay, dominant is called the hero, auxiliary is called the good parent, tertiary is called the unmatured child, inferior is called animus. And yesterday, the first time I heard Sue Blair on this topic, and she was talking about the balancing, and I love that. I love that, the balancer. And then the further you go down inside what we have said, this is not part of the conscious part of me. We've got the opposing, we've got the critical parent, the trickster, the one that says you're going to make the same mistake ever and ever again. And then we've got the demoniac, which I tend not to use so much because I already some people, we have some deeply ingrained religious beliefs, and demoniac, they don't like it much. Okay, and so for those who are not familiar with John Beebe's work, I took INFP as an example. So we've got the introverted feeling as my hero. I love to connect with people in trainings or in those kind of presentation using my good parent, which is extroverted intuition. Introverted sensing is a mess every time I need to do my tax declaration, and I would love to have someone do that for me because the unmatured child says, hey, help me. And then the inferior is the one that kicks in from time to time, and I'm ashamed of it because then I can be very tough. And then I remember a lady, she tried to help me and I was not asking for any help. And probably she was quite surprised because I became a bit tough, because I hate when people try to please me, because that's my opposing function. And then I have to say that when something happened, which I did not foresee happening, I can be mad about myself for weeks and weeks and months, because this is my critical part, visioning. And when something happened, I say to myself, you should have seen it happen. I didn't see it happen. I can be really mad. And then there is the trickster. Sometimes I drive a cart for fun. And every time I put myself into this stuff and I say, you are not so young anymore and you drive very badly. So just do it for the fun and don't try to make a performance. And after the third turn, I'm already exhausted and I already missed 2 or 3 times what I had to do because I'm just trying to drive too fast. And it's my trickster that kicks in and I can't do anything about it until now, because when the trickster goes on, he takes the lead. And then finally, there is this wonderful demoniac that I've been trying to use for 35 years when I was an electronics engineer. And then I've tried to use for years and years in my business when I needed to take a sound business solution, until the day I discovered it was my demoniac, and I just stopped it. And I never make any more those matrices with weights and criteria, because I can do it the day after and I will have different results, okay? But from time to time, during a nightmare, I wake up and it's my demoniac that say, hey boy, I've got the solution for you. And I find it so logical. It's like I did a reset. And so from time to time, before I go to bed, I say to my demoniac, if you would be so kind to help me this night, wake me up in the middle of a nightmare and give me the solution, I would love it. And basically, it's been a week, I've been calling it, but the demoniac decides when it comes, and when it's not time, it's not time. Okay? What are your questions? Any question? No? Okay, great. Okay, so let's start with the actual stuff and let's look to what can potentially be the impact of an E and I type difference. And for that, Sarah, if you would like to launch a second poll, I would like to ask you whether a difference between I and E is generally for you an easy type difference, or whether you tend to be attracted to people who have a E and I type difference compared to you, or whether it's relatively difficult relationship for you. And so right now I have one vote, attracted to this type of difference. Okay, 2, 3, easy.
I'm not going to vote because it's my husband and me, and I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
It's everything.
Okay.
And there wasn't multiple choice.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, probably Dean, you make such we would all love to hear that, but that's the best way to attract people to say, I'm not going to tell you that. Okay, fine. So, okay, generally an easy relationship. Okay, that's what I expected. That's what I expected. Although Sterling, one of my biggest disappointment on the professional scene has been with 1 or 2 ENFPs. And at the beginning of a relationship, there was such an attraction. Such an attraction was incredible. I said, I want to work with this person. It happened 2 times to me. And the relationship was quite easy, but yet it led to nowhere and nothing. Okay. So any comment on that? Those people that said it's an easy or difficult relationship, an example you'd like to share? Julie, Marianne, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like Dee, my husband also is an extreme extrovert, but in general for extroverts, I think I use them to help me in a situation because they're more engaged and more willing to talk in a social situation, and I can sit back and listen for quite a while. So I always find them very helpful in that way, and it's almost my barrier that it helps me until I can collect everything, and then I can come out and and approach. So
and an ESFP to go in a party, that must be practical.
Yeah, it really helps a great deal. They have to push me in though first.
Welcome to the club. Julie?
I just realized I cross-pollinated. I tend to have difficulty. I have ENFJ preferences. I tend to have difficulty with those with INFP preferences, and our Fs are in an opposing situation. So it tends to be not so much INFJ that I have difficulty with.
Okay. Okay. Okay, great.
I have an observation as well.
Yeah.
I think that, so in my life, my husband is extroverting all day long as a psychotherapist. And so, Marianne, at the end of the day, I don't, my energy level probably, is not what he needs or wants. And so we've had to learn the leave me alone from him so he has his space to regenerate. And I have a pretty broad expansion for energy and people that doesn't exhaust me easily.
Yeah, I'm an INFP, and if I have a full week of training, I need a break for the whole weekend, which can be difficult for the family, by the way.
Yeah, I found it difficult to answer the question because generally I find it goes very well, but there are definitely circumstances where I can see the EI can become a big source of conflict. One of the ones is the one I've seen repeatedly, the one Dean just kind of mentioned, where the person with extroversion preferences is not getting enough social interaction, right? They work from home, and the person with introverted preferences works outside the home. And that dynamic is just really, really rough. I've even seen it with the same couple, and then they got it swapped and the dynamic changed amazing and everything was so much better when the person with extroversion preferences left the home and the person with introverted persons worked in the home, and things were just like, just like icing on cake. It just went smoothly. So I do find that it works generally well, but there are definitely some circumstances where that EI can become a real challenge.
And basically what you say is basically the answer of this presentation, which is, how tired are you? Are you tired right now? If you're tired, of course, it's going to be much more difficult. And how stressed are you? Of course. Okay. So Sarah, I tried to share my screen. I don't know whether you see my screen. You see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't appear as being shown on my screen. It's okay. It's okay. Fine. So just a small reminder. Those are a couple of IE type differences, ISTP, ESTP, and those are the different, the other four, the one ISTG, ESTG. And I've put that on the communication type lens, but you can put that, of course, on all the different lenses. And in order to keep under the hour, you've got here the summary of all of that. And it's very interesting because same communication style, okay, type of energy can be totally different, but same communication style, same leadership style, okay, once again, energy can be different, same conflict management style, same change management style, interaction style are different because you go from initiating, which is a facet of extroversion, to responding, which is a facet of introversion. So I would say, if I would be trying to do a model saying what is the probability that works well, it could say it's looking like it could be in a good direction. And the archetypes is very interesting. Look at what happens with the archetype. You will see every time I've taken INFP to simplify for the people that are not used to with archetypes, they have always the same frame of reference. Look to what happens to my dominant. Well, it's the good parent of my mate. So what I am and the way you go in communication with the others are the same. And it's reciprocal. So the way I tend to go to the other people, it just fits with them. And I have the impression that, and it's based on my personal experience, that an EI difference can be very attractive because the vertical axis is more my axis, the horizontal axis is more the axis of the relationship with the others. But look, there are other different things that are interesting. You can't help me. I need your help, but you can't help me. And so is it. So I have depression, which is, it may be a relationship which could be very attractive, but is there going to be an easy support from one of the person to the other? I have some question marks. And look at what is interesting. I think one of the two relationships, which is an ENFP that didn't work well, was a guy. I wanted to work with him. He has no strategy at all. And I'm not bad at making strategies. And probably at some point of time, in trying to help him envision the future and have a vision, stable vision of the future, maybe I may have been a bit too critical or too demanding or too negative, and maybe it has hurt his opposing. And I remember a moment where he was in FE in a way which didn't please me. So it can be an attractive one. Degree of support may be questioned, but yet it may have some dangers with it. It may have some danger with it. And I haven't come to conclusion of what would be the impact of the tricksters going to the demoniac and the trickster going to the demoniac. I can't draw any conclusion on the potential difficulties or richness of that, but I find this relationship very, very interesting. There could be an attraction, could be like a kind of magnet that you are attracted to this person, but you may be stuck having a difficulty of helping the other person. And sometimes when one of the person goes there, it could be difficult for the opposing of the other person. Okay, so I have a tendency to believe that INFP is a kind of mirror, which is very attractive, but you need to be cautious with this one. I see you reacting, Dean.
I love that, a mirror. And sometimes what's reflected back to me or reflected back to him is startling. And I think there's an assumption that we have the same language, because we do in so many ways, not communication patterns, but essential motivators. And so there's this, wait, I thought we were on the same page. Oh, but there's a different dominant auxiliary and different lenses.
Yeah, I find that a very interesting combination. It's a mirror, it's a magnet, it's very attractive, but it may have some kind of dangers. Okay. Now, if we go to the J and P difference, if you would like Sarah to launch the third and last poll, there's the same question, but now the difference is P and J. Do you find this relationship to be easy? Do you tend to be attracted by those people? Or is that generally a difficult relationship for you? Okay, so yes, so more close to 60% of you, you've said generally is the difficult relationship, and attraction is 2 on you, and easy relationship is 3% on 12 votes. Okay, great. Well, I had expected this. I had expected this, and let me explain you why. But before, maybe some of you wants to share something about the JP relationship.
I'll just,
Yeah, Marianne.
I answered for the J in my life. I don't find it a difficult relationship, but I think the J finds that sort of laid back, not hurried or whatever relationship in me. I think it drives them crazy. Doesn't drive me crazy. I just sort of go along. But I think that the difficult part is on their part.
Okay.
Going, oh, we have to be patient, and wait, or whatever
So,
it is.
So it could be worse.
Yeah, exactly.
This is Jane. Back before we knew personality type, I remember every weekend discussion of me saying, "What do you want to do Saturday?" And my husband saying, "Why do you want to know?" Well, because I want to make plans. Well, how will I know? I don't know how tired I am. I don't know what the weather will be, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, but can we put some stake in the ground, just anything. And then of course we learned about type, and not that we don't ever go at it, but.
Yeah, yeah, it can be funny. It can be funny. Okay. So,
this is Suzanne. Oh,
yeah.
Hi,
Yes.
this is Suzanne. So I'm an ENFJ and I'm married to an ENTP. I would say to my the perceiving types in my left, say my husband, for instance, he has a relationship with time that makes me really uncomfortable. Like he's always wanting to be really early for things because he doesn't trust his timing, where I have a better sense of timing, and it really, there's a herky-jerky aspect to, I find many, I'm just going to speak for NTPs because I live with and I know them so well.
Okay, but Suzanne and Marianne, without going into details, I decided here to stick to 1 letter difference.
Okay.
I made no, but it's not, but I made a full analysis of all the type combinations.
Yeah.
And what I have discovered is that some time combinations are what I called non-symmetrical relationships. So what you see here is a symmetrical relationship. You can't help me there, but I can't help you there. It's the same combination. But a few of the type combinations looks like one of the two should be experiences more difficulties than the other ones. You see more combination of function that looks like being potentially a problem for one than the other. And sometime in life, whether it's us or people we know, we love, you may see that in a couple, whether it's professional or private, that one of the two has more difficulties. And you may say, well, it's because maybe one of the two is better emotional intelligence or is less under stress. It may also be sometimes that it's more of a burden for one of the two than the other.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully, most of the cases are symmetrical, but some cases are non-symmetrical.
Jean-Luc, I realized I may have just had an insight. I may have thrown off the poll incorrectly. So I was one of the few people saying, "Oh yeah, it's great working with my opposite, which is ENTJ, I should say." And I realized, actually, the first several times I took the indicator, I come up ENTJ, and it's only after really doing best fit work that it became clear I'm actually ENTP. And I was thinking to myself prior to this, earlier when we were talking, that actually the type I'm most repelled by is ENTP.
Yeah.
I have the most, and all of a sudden, if I envision myself as an ENTJ, as the indicator might indicate, right, then that JP dynamic is actually completely there. I get along great with ENTJs, and I really struggle sometimes with ENTPs.
Yeah, you may remember, Sterling, before the COVID forced us to be online, the last BAPT conference I came with Bertrand Terola, and we did a few physical tests. And I've been checking the deep motivational drivers, and it's difficult to speak about them because we have no statistics and it's physical tests. So but they tend to influence the way we express our type, and they tend to push us to develop more one of our functions. And so, for example, to take my example, I have a deep motivational driver that pushed me to develop my opposing. So I love to please people, and I hate when people please me. And so what I see, but I don't have enough stats, whatever, is that often when I have people that have an hesitation and I test their deep motivational drivers, everything comes back into place. So that may be a deep motivational drivers that push you to your extroverted thinking. That may be that. Okay, just aside. Okay, so GP difference, JP, excuse me, French speaking, JP difference. So we have got those 4 differences, JP, and those 4 differences. Okay, what does it give in a summary? Very interesting. Same communication style, you see, no troubles. But leadership style differs for the sensing, because you go from artisan to guardian or the opposite. No change for the ends. But then conflict and change are totally different. Interaction styles also, part of them is different. It's the opposite of the interactions of the leadership styles. So there, the picture is a bit more complicated, okay? Same communication, different conflict, different change, sometimes same leadership, sometimes same interaction style. So the picture becomes a bit more blurred and difficult to follow, but the archetypes are really fascinating. Look at what happens. This is where I feel the best with myself. This is where you tend to criticize. This is where I tend to go in communication with other people. This is what you tend to oppose. And it's symmetrical. So if model would say the truth every time, I would say this is going to be quite interesting and challenging. And can't expect you to help me. And this could be interesting. This tend to be a bit explosive. This can be quite explosive. So those so kind INFJs and those so beautiful idealist INFPs, when we get mad together, can be funny. Okay? And don't expect me to help you with your logic. I can't. And basically, when we both start to have our external sensing kicking in, that can be very funny. So on paper, if models would always say the truth, this would be quite an interesting relationship with some kind of heavy potential difficulties and so low support. And by the way, it's just a 1-letter difference. And I've just went from E, I to J and P. But it makes such a huge difference, And in my life, I haven't got the opportunity to work or live with a lot of INFJs. And so I don't have a background to say, well, it's very difficult for me. But when I look at that on paper and when I think to other difference like ISTPs, ISTJs that I've seen in my professional life or private life, that can be a very interesting and challenging one. And I always say when I see those kind of things and people ask me, I say it can be rich and challenging, or it can be less challenging, but maybe less rich. Because I always like to give a positive and negative message, because whether it's going to work or not is what you do out of it, not what the model says it could be. Okay, so you've got the table of link here. Okay, so what about the dominant function? Well, dominant function, just to make sure we're on the same wavelength, ISTJ is introverted sensing. INTJ is introverted intuition as dominant. So I change one dominant for the other, and I keep the three same letters. Same for ISFJs, INFJs, and all here are the four others. So those are the combination where you just change the dominant function. And if you apply that on all the lenses, it gives this. Communication style is different. Of course, you change one of the function pairs, one of the function and function pairs. Of course, communication is different. Most leadership styles are the same, except ESTJ, ESFJs, and ISTPs, ISFPs. Okay. Conflict, when the dominant is irrational, of course, conflict is different. Okay, because you change extroverted thinking for extroverted feeling, for example, of course. And change, of course, when the dominant is an irrational, so you change, for example, extroverted sensing for extroverted intuition, of course, you're going to change the change management style. Interaction styles, one case on two is different, one case on two is the same, and I haven't found a way to present that would simplify it. So I haven't found a rule that would make it simple. Archetypes are quite interesting. Look at what happens to my dominant. Oh gosh. Oops. Here we go. I managed to study for 5 years electronics engineering with a guy who was an INTP, and he later, for 10, 15 years, was my brother-in-law. And very interestingly, we never had a deep connection, but we were very good friends. I remember working with him in the electronics laboratory was just fun, but difficult at the end of the year when we needed to summarize all the things we did. But exploring was so fun. We would come to the electronics laboratory and say, what do we do today? And we would start. And probably at the end of the 4 hours, we would do something different than what we started with. But the end of the year, when we were accountable to show what we did, was a bit more difficult. But we never really connected. He was a good friend, but we never really connected. Okay. And so probably, although our relationship was never up to there, we would have had the same problems. Okay. And basically, I know that sometimes I can be tough. When I'm mad, I can be tough. And I know it was displeasing him. And I know one day he expressed emotion, and it makes me laugh for 10 years, the way he expressed emotions. Okay. So this one is very interesting because the horizontal axis remains the same, which can create an easy go day-to-day type of communication, but to connect deeply may be somewhat more difficult. And some of the stress patterns can be difficult to go through for the other person. So once again, we come with something which is totally different, totally different. And here you've got the correspondence table, and you see once again, this is a totally symmetrical relationship. Okay. And then the last one is the auxiliary function type difference. And here, ISTJs, okay, dominant is SI, I keep it. I just change the auxiliary and I go for extroverted thinking to extroverted feeling. And here you have the comparison for the 4 types, okay? And you see immediately that the communication style is going to be different. And the leadership style, once again, just two are the same, the other one are different.
It's over.
And,
Honestly, no, once it's over, I'm gonna go.
and the conflict and change will be the opposite for the dominant. So conflict is the auxiliary is the rational, is going to be different. Is the auxiliary is irrational, is going to be the same conflict. And for change, it's the opposite. If your auxiliary is the extroverted intuition, like my case, well, change management is going to be different. The ISFP and INFP, we don't have the same style of change management. Interaction style, once again, is half the case different, half the case the same. And here again, trying to summarize wouldn't make it clearer. And archetype is also very interesting. My son-in-law is an ISFP and I'm an INFP. We have a very easy deep connection. We never have a conflict. We have differences. They last maximum 5 minutes. He has come with a total different brands of life than me, and we have managed we are living in Quebec. It happens that some families live in 2 houses that close to each other. That's our case. So I see him daily, 3, 4, 5 times a day. We never have a conflict that lasts for more than 5 minutes. Okay. And I know when he can be mad. He knows that I can be mad, and we can manage that. But the day-to-day connection is so strange. That guy on Friday afternoon, to get relaxed, he starts a do-it-by-yourself stuff. And he assembles something very complicated in an hour time. And you see him after that, he's relaxed. I would do that. It would take me a day. I would hurt my both hands and I would lose half of the pieces. But I tried, when I speak about type with him, it's just to make jokes, because he finds that so irrational and strange and esoteric. So it's a kind of joke. So our joke is, let me do it by yourself, I say, and he says, don't talk to me about your stuff. Okay. And so he has kind of difficulty when he see my difficulties. On Saturday, I left the conference to help him because he did something very big in the garden. I wanted to show I was there. And after 5 minutes, he said, just keep watching. Stop helping. Because I had missed already some parts of the equipment. I was about to hurt him. And I did something totally wrong. And my son as ISTP was there helping. They said to me, and don't speak about type, just watch this, show that you are there, and it's enough. So the day-to-day relationship can be quite different. Like, I'm always the guy that will help with the strategy. And given I love both of them, I have my critical parent totally under control. But I know that sometimes with participants that are ISFPs, I need to keep my critical parent under control. So it's totally the opposite as the dominant case, is that the connection can be very deep, but the day-to-day I go to the other person can be much more complicated. And so I wanted to simplify things compared to what I did last time, which was all kind of cases, by keeping only one letter different. But I wanted to show that it's just one letter difference, but it can be so different, okay? And so the basic conclusion is the following. And so we have the same opposing and, of course, the same demoniac. So to help each other being logic is not easy, okay? And so the conclusion is very simple. First, a reminder. Time was never meant to put people in boxes, and the model is just an attempt at understanding reality. Never force reality inside the model, okay? There was a very interesting discussion between Markey and I don't remember who about the John Beebe model and the other model that was proposed about the evolution in the type preference, and the person said it's complementary, and I love the answer, okay? But the conclusion is a one letter difference doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And there is no one letter difference which is easy, no one letter difference which is difficult. I love to take as an example the ENI difference. It's attractive, it's a magnet, it's a mirror, but that can be a very tricky one, because behind this attraction lie some potential difficulties. So any type difference has the potential to be wonderful or difficult. Any type difference poses its own richness and challenges. And I'm going to state it because I can never state it enough. The success of the relationship is what you make out of it. Type is a wonderful key to warn you or to become sensitive to what are the potential difficulties, but what are also the potential richness. And one of our fellow participants and colleagues said yesterday, this training saved my marriage. She said that, this training saved my marriage. And so type is wonderful when it helps you understand what you need to be cautious about and what are your things you should enjoy. But then it's what you do out of it. It's your type development. It's your emotional intelligence that makes the difference. So when Teresa Moon showed this picture of the guy that says this type difference is blue and is red, it makes me upset. It makes me upset. So what are your questions?
Thanks, John. There was a part which you mentioned about INFP and INFJ,
Yes.
where you said INFP loves to please people, but hates when people try to please the INFP, which resonated with me quite a lot.
Okay.
When people try to please me, I'm like, no, just be yourself. Like that would, and I like that. But I was wondering, what is the like reverse explanation for an INFJ? Like, what do they like or hate?
Well, normally, because it's as soon as you leave your own type, you start to make inferences based on your experience, your knowledge of the mother. I would expect an INFJ to be more opposing what is extroverted intuition. Okay, and I had this experience with an INTJ I was working with. So it's different horizontal axis, but same vertical axis. We did training together, and it's the only training that I would prepare a week in advance. We would always meet on Saturday, review all the documentation, redo the timing, although we did this training a couple of times together. And as a good INFP, one day I was a bit tired on day 3. And what do I do when I'm tired? I change. So when I'm tired, I need to change something. I need to have some inputs new. And so I said, gosh, why don't we change the order? Instead of doing A and B, we do B and A. And she became upset about me. And she said, we did not foresee it like this. We did not plan it like this. Please don't make things complicated. And I said, okay, it makes things complicated for her. It doesn't make things complicated for me, but okay, she was not in a stage where I thought it was good to arguing about time. I said, okay, I just ran into her opposite. So I need to stay consistent and find a different way of managing my stress. So we kept doing A and B. And then when I was doing B, I introduced something different just for my fun and to get out of stress. So I would expect that. And I experienced it with this INTJ person who's happened to have the same vertical axis as this one. Okay. And so that's once again where I love type, because it's day 3, it's a difficult group, it's a bit tiring, and you could easily run into a conflict with that. And then the ego starts in, and then we go. And the ability to say, okay, I'm running on opposing, did a silly mistake, help me. Like the ENFP I may have worked with, I was really trying to help him get a vision. The guy is good at something, but he's no any vision. I was just running into his introverted intuition as an opposing. And at that time, I'd never heard about that. Okay. Did it answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. What else?
Something I've started to explore and found some interesting dynamics in is looking at the different way in which Linda Behrens breaks up interaction styles and temperament. Those kind of like different ways. So example for interaction styles, directing and informing. I find that, and I've started to look through some of those, if you think of those as like three different sublenses, right? So what do each of the interaction styles have in common versus different? So, you know, and so like directing, informing, or for temperament, concrete versus abstract, you start to go look at these, and it became very clear that across those dimensions, like directing versus informing, that it can cause all kinds of challenges, and that lots of communication problems occur when you across that dimension. And what's interesting is it can be just as many problems as if you have the same communication style as if you have a different one.
Yeah.
For example, you know, but this idea of informing, oh boy, we're running out of apples, and directing, go buy the apples, right? That discussion point to me seems to come up a lot in ongoing relationships, and how you handle a lot of the stuff in the relationship is that informing and directing gets you in real trouble. I have to be real careful.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. And I find mixing, because personally, for helping people see the difference between J and P, I love to talk about the way they talk, which is quite close to directing, informing. But for me, for example, the ENTP gets things going is a fascinating combination. When I discovered, I did not discover, I was trained by Susan Nash at the APT conference in Salt Lake City, and I'm thankful to Susan, because she helped me understand things that seems so strange to me, like an ISFP is a behind the scene. I had problem believing in the interaction style, and then I understood the complexity. So interaction style combination with some of the profiles is a fascinating stuff, fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah, and ISFP and ENTP are for me fascinating in terms of the combination interaction style and type is just very, very interesting.
You know, but I found equal lens interesting perspectives if you look at like initiating versus responding, or outcome versus process, is that each one of these can become an interesting lens to look at the dynamic of two people interacting. I'm working with a lady who does a lot of work with sex work, and we're talking about discussing those in the context of consent.
Yeah.
Right? If you can think about having a consent discussion between two young people, that informing versus directing, initiating versus responding, is that these things come out in various abstract versus concrete, affiliated, pragmatic. That these things across these ways that Linda Behrens kind of looks at them actually each become a really interesting and different way to discuss those kinds of issues in communication.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that to the discussion, because in French it could be a bad joke, but it's not a bad joke. It's a touchy discussion. In French, you could make a bad joke with that. But I mean, sex consent, informing, directing can be a very difficult discussion to bring in the media or on the social media, and yet probably sometimes it leads to some nightmares. Yes, definitely. And informing, directing is indeed one of the very interesting difficulties in communication between people. And even I have already heard a lot of consultants that criticize the informing communication style because they consider it as not efficient. Well, it's just a kind of preference.
Informing is great for certain kinds of problems, and directing is much better for other kinds of problems. It's that, you know, I mean, that's like many things with type, it's learning the skill of when to use the right thing.
Yeah. And there is a culture aspect also, because I see in Quebec, communication is much more informing than, for example, in France or even in Belgium. I don't know for mostly English-speaking Canada, Marianne, but for the mostly French-speaking Canada, the communication style is very informing, very informing.
When I first learned about that from Linda, I had a huge aha moment because I would apparently, in my mind, be clear with my staff what I needed them to do. And then the next day they'd come back and they hadn't done it, or a week later, and I would get, of course, I want everyone to be happy together, but I'd be pissed. And then I'd realize, oh, I wasn't being clear. I was wanting to persuade as opposed to being what was necessary and being directive. So that was a big shift for me.
Yep.
When I started as a trainer, my first group, I wanted them to do some exercise and was very difficult to have them proceed. So I said, bad luck. And as Sterling said 1 hour earlier, after 10 groups, I started to consider whether the problem was not coming from me. And it's my informing / extroverted intuition style. Because not only am I informing, but also as in extroverted intuition, I tend to be very vague. So often now I will say, what do you need from me to make it clear? And often people say, you didn't say this, you didn't say this. And every time I say, oh gosh, they're right, I didn't say that. Like, how much time do we have to make an exercise? I tend to forget about that. I tend to forget, but that's important. Do they have 2 minutes or 20 minutes? Not the same work. So yeah, informing can be funny versus directing.
There's I've taken some experimenting with vulnerability discussions in my own personal relationship, and trying to realize sometimes when I would make an informing comment about something I needed, but it really came across much more like a passive aggressive, right? There's this thing that's not happening. And I found that if I am willing to be open and vulnerable and not directing in an aggressive way, but by the way, I think I need this from you. Can you please give this to me, right? Which is actually a directing kind of communication, but with a diplomatic language. But with vulnerability, I found that was actually way more effective a form of communication than sometimes that informing passive aggressiveness.
Well said. Yes, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But we leave secondary school. I was able to say in Belgium where you find coal, where you find this, where you find that. But for me, there were 3 categories of people: interesting people, not interesting people, and dumb people. You don't go very far with that in life. I knew where you find coal in Belgium. Great, very helpful.
I would like to have some responses from some of the those with introverted preferences still left here. There's a lot that you're all here, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
The one thing that came to my mind is, as Roger Pearman's research shows, the dominant's king and everything else develops in service to the dominant. And even my second function is extroverted feeling. And when I watch Susan Nash or Suzanne Brew read a room and know what to do, I realize how bad my extroverted feeling is. And then I can pick up the tips and make challenges to myself like, okay, I need to know every participant's name before the coffee break, or I need to do this, or am I remembering that? And I might even have a Post-it note or, something in my notes or something in the actual workshop that makes me use extroverted feeling. And it just reminds me that even though, like when I'm working with ENFJs, what they do so naturally looks so different in me that they can misread me, especially with the delay before I actually get to the same conclusion. And I'm wondering if others have consciously learned from watching that auxiliary in somebody else be their dominant, where that's their dominant.
I tend to admire ENFPs. They seem so at ease with people. I was shy when I was a kid, and when I see ENFPs, I say it must be wonderful as a life. Yeah. But there is one question I'm asking myself for a couple of years now, is whether introverts and extroverts is how we manage to go into our auxiliary, because we introverts, our auxiliary is an extrovert function. And it's the opposite for extroverts. And I'm trying to understand whether it's not easier for some aspects of our life to go in the auxiliary function, because when you are in contact with the external world. And once again, a model is just an attempt to understand, to help you grow. But I have asked myself this question a couple of times, whether it's maybe we don't have more incentives as an introvert, especially when I see here in Quebec. Quebec is a very extrovert culture, very extrovert culture. You listen to the television and you know a lot of things about people that I can watch the television in Belgium for 30 years. I will not learn half of the thing I learn about famous people in 1 year in Quebec. And so maybe culture plays a role, but I'm asking myself the fact that the auxiliary is an extroverted function, whether we don't have more incentive to develop it, or whether it doesn't play a role. Maybe more introverted culture, they would say the opposite. But here in Quebec, it's amazing how extrovert the culture is. For me as a Belgian, it's amazing, amazing.
Because we know that we protect, like the introvert protects that, most important, dominant, that when we come with our face, that it's easier to share that, we don't have to protect the feeling for myself, so the sensing can face the world. And you still keep protected that absolute most important aspect of the personality. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true that I tend to see that to be in extrovert mode, I need to be okay with myself.
Mm-hmm.
As an introverted feeling, when I feel okay with myself, I can be very extroverted. As soon as I don't feel okay with myself, whoops, extroverted intuition goes away.
Yeah, you start to keep that down.
I have
Interesting.
given,
You say about Quebec, because of having moved, I see an enormous difference in this area of the country. It's very, I'm going to give it a personality. It's very ISTJ. My dad was an ISTJ. He would have loved it here. You better be orderly, it's very interesting. I hadn't realized that that aspect, because from where we were from, everything was sort of freewheeling, and I really see the difference, and you can see that the whole area almost has its own personality, and would be different in Quebec, different in Alberta. I'm quite surprised by that, actually.
Quebec is very ENFP culture. Mm-hmm. And I don't know Canada enough, but we have a bit the same in Belgium between the Dutch and the French speaking side. You can clearly, quote unquote, correlate some of the difference with type aspects.
Yes, yeah.
There is a lady, I think her name is Meyer, and I think the first name is Erin. She wrote a book, Cultural Map. And if I remember well, it's 10 facets of culture. Most of them you can correlate them with type.
With type.
Very interesting lady. Her book is very interesting.
Is it MEIRE? The name of the
Meyer. Meyer.
MAYER.
You know what? I'm going to. I will go on Amazon. I don't make advertising for Amazon whatsoever, but it's easy to find information. Give me 1 minute. I'll try to find it on Amazon.
Okay.
I think you wanted to say something, Natalie?
I think if you could stop sharing the slides, Jean-Luc,
Okay.
then everyone can have the gallery view. And just
Okay.
to say, we've got just over 10 minutes before the next session starts. So I'll need to end this meeting in 10 minutes, but very happy to leave it running till then.
Okay, I'm on their website.
I just put a link in there for a book called Where in the World Do I Belong by Brent Massey, who did a bunch of research with step 2 and different cultures.
Okay.
So it breaks out each country, not just by broadly by type, but also where they're out of type preference on the step 2 facets.
Oh,
I don't know how robust it is, but it was just a very interesting book to go through and have all these countries and their step 2 results.
okay. And here you find, I will share that for 30 seconds, the book of Erin Meyer, Culture Map. Okay. So, you stop the recording, Sarah?
I'll stop the recording now because I think we've probably done. So thank you, Jean-Luc.
You're welcome.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Informative, very comprehensive.
Okay, thank you so much.